Annie's Life in Lists by Kristen Mahoney. 5 things I hate about my real name, Andromeda. Number 1, everyone says, that's a weird name. Number 2, no one knows how to spell it. Number 3, no one knows how to pronounce it. You pronounce it like this, Andromeda. Number 4, no one can remember it. This one probably bothers me the most because I remember just about everything. Number 5, even though most people call me Annie, my brother says my nickname should be Drama, or Duh. His name is Ted, after my great-grandfather. Apparently, Mom and Dad saved all their naming flair for me. 3 things I like about my name. Number 1, my mom says I was named after her favorite constellation. Number 2, my dad says Andromeda was also a mythical princess. Number 3, my nickname, Annie. I'm Annie. This is my life in lists. 9 things I see when I look in the mirror. Number 1, freckles. Lots of them. Especially in summer, of course. Number 2, indescribable hair color. Not indescribable like indescribably beautiful, just really hard to describe. Not blonde, not brown. My grandma Elaine calls it dirty blonde, but I don't like the sound of that. Number 3, green eyes, my favorite part. Number 4, a bump on the bridge of a long nose. This I get from my mom. Number 5, a little gap between my 2 front teeth. Number 6, almost always a t-shirt. Number 7, almost always leggings or jeans. Number 8, in summer, flip-flops. Number 9, in winter, sneakers or boots. 3 things I never see when I look in the mirror. 1, a dress. 2, expensive sneakers. My mom doesn't believe in them. Number 3, smooth hair. It's always kind of straggly, even 5 minutes after I brushed it. 3 things you can't tell just by looking at me. 1, I'm left-handed. Although if you looked really closely, you might see that I always have pencil smudges on my left pinky from where my hand has dragged across my writing. 2, I'm allergic to amoxicillin. 3, I have an amazing memory. 5 things about my memory. 1, I have a regular memory for things like spelling tests and phone numbers. 2, I have a not-so-great memory for things like bringing permission slips back to school and putting my homework folder in my backpack. 3, I definitely do not have a crime-solving photographic memory like Cam Jansen. 4, I have a weirdly amazing memory for things about people. I remember their names, what they wore on different days, who their brothers and sisters are, what their houses look like, and what their pets are named. 5, I remember things about people that will never remember about me. In fact, there are kids at my school who don't even know I exist, but I could tell you their names, their favorite sports, where they went on vacation, and what they ate for lunch. 4 things other people say about my memory. 1, my mom says it runs in the family, and that some people just have amazing memories. Hers is pretty good too. She remembers the names of all my grandparents' cousins, even my dad's side. And her old friends tell her she's like their childhood Google, because anytime they forget something from when they were kids, the name of a teacher, the secret nicknames they had for their crushes, the ending of a crazy story, they just ask her. 2, my dad says I should be proud of how much I remember. 3, my best friend, Millie Lerner, thinks it's cool because A, I can tell her the names of all the 5th grade boys she thinks are interesting. B, I remember all the teachers' first names from reading the PTA directory one day while I was bored. C, when someone annoys her, I make her feel better by reminding her of embarrassing things they did when they were younger. For example, when Millie got glasses, Hannah Krensler called her a 4-eyed freak, and I told Millie not to sweat what Hannah says because she used to shove her teddy bear's fur up her nose. 4, Teddy says my memory is creepy and makes me seem like a stalker. I tell him you would not believe how much you would learn if you just paid attention. But Ted still has a habit of nudging me when he thinks I'm going to say too much, especially when I'm remembering something about him and someone in his grade, especially if it's a girl. Like when we saw Sophia Carlin in Key Food and I reminded him of how he once said she looked like Queen Amidala. He stepped on my toe for that one. Hard. What I think of my memory. 1, I won't admit this to Ted, but it can be a little embarrassing. Remembering so much about people can make you feel like no one else is as interested in you as you are in them. For example, once Millie and I knocked on her neighbor Sheila's door to tell her we'd found her cat in the hallway. Sheila's son Pete had been on Ted's soccer team 3 years earlier, and all the boys called him Professor because he was always sharing weird soccer trivia that no one else knew. Of course, I remembered this, so when Pete answered the door, I automatically said, "Hey, Professor, we found Mittens." He squinted at me for a second before saying, "Who are you?" So to recap, not only did I know his nickname and his cat's name, but he had no idea who I was, even though I had been at every one of his soccer games. And he had come to the team pizza party at our apartment. And I was his neighbor's best friend. You'd think he might be embarrassed not to know me, but somehow I was the one blushing. B, on the first day of school last year, when my teacher, Miss Allen, wondered aloud how we would distinguish between the two Emmas in our class since both of their last names started with S, I said, "We could just call one Emma Marie and the other Emma Elizabeth," because I'd remembered both of their middle names from when they had written them on their plastic Easter baskets at an egg hunt in the park in kindergarten. Clearly, neither Emma remembered this, though, because they both looked at me and said, "How do you know my middle name?" in stereo. Cue red face again. Number 2, lately it's a serious problem, since my memory got me kicked out of school. Ted really doesn't have to worry anymore about me saying too much. Now I will keep all this information to myself. 4 things I have pretended not to remember so people wouldn't think I was weird. 1, the first, middle, and last name of a kid I met once at a birthday party when I was in kindergarten, 5 years ago, and the fact that he didn't want ice cream and that he completely missed the donkey and pinned the tail on the donkey. Number 2, a conversation I had with Jesse Berner in first grade where he told me he hadn't washed his hair in 2 months. 3, the street my teacher lives on. 4, the names of people who don't know me when I see them in public, like when Aiden Little from my old kiddie music class was standing right in front of Mom and me in the line at the movies, or when Lola Moran, one of the leads in the school musical, put her blanket down beside ours at a summer concert in the park. I didn't just pretend not to know their names. I pretended not to notice they were there at all. It wasn't that hard since they didn't notice me either, and I don't think they were pretending. Anyway, it's not such a big deal for me to lie low like I did with Aiden and Lola, because I'm a pretty quiet kid anyway. 4 examples of how quiet I can be. 1, on my 3rd day of day camp last summer, the head counselor marked me absent because she didn't notice I was there. 2, whenever it's time to line up in preschool, my teacher would say, "Let's see who else can be as quiet as Annie." Mom put a stop to that one after I told her about it. 3, our neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Hartzell, called me Angie for a year, and I never spoke up. Ted finally corrected her when he heard her say it. 4, in 2nd grade, Charlotte Devlin made me give her my peanut butter crackers every day at lunch. Peanut butter crackers are my favorite, but I never told anyone. Toward the end of the year, Millie noticed this was happening, and she told Charlotte to cut it out. That's how Millie and I became friends. 4 reasons I'm quiet. 1, I'm listening. 2, I'm watching. 3, I'm thinking. 4, I don't know what to say. The last one happens a lot. I see other people joke about things they've done together, but if I bring up something I remember about someone, I'm afraid she'll think I'm weird for remembering it. Or in the case of Charlotte and the peanut butter crackers, I'm afraid someone won't like me, so instead, I don't say anything. One unique situation where I winded up talking too much. 1, when I'm nervous and the only other person in the room is an adult, especially an adult with authority. I'm not sure why I do it. Maybe I think that if I talk enough, I'll be able to keep whatever it is that I'm nervous about from happening. I know this doesn't make me special. Lots of kids probably babble when they wind up on a one-on-one with a coach or a teacher, or their school principal. But most kids don't have the same memory I have, so their babbling isn't such a big deal. One time, my memory and my babbling turned out to be a very big deal. When I told the principal, Mr. Lawrence, that his brother looked like a dry cleaner. 9 reasons I was nervous in front of Mr. Lawrence. 1, I had never been to his office before. Being a quiet, cooperative kid, I'm not the sort of person who finds herself getting sent to the principal very often, or ever. 2, he was the principal. See above. Adults in authority make me nervous. 3, I was delivering a note from my teacher, Mrs. Simmons. 4, I had no idea what the note was about. 5, my imagination was starting to run a little wild as I wondered what the note might say. 6, I wondered if it had something to do with the Pinballs, a book I'd borrowed from Mrs. Simmons' classroom library and never returned because I lost it. 7, I wondered if the note was Mrs. Simmons asking Mr. Lawrence what my punishment should be. 8, then I wondered if the note was something good, like a request for a class party, or a field trip, or an award for the most cooperative student. Number 9, wait, maybe that last one wasn't actually good. An award for cooperation would just be embarrassing, really. Anyway, you see where my nerves were coming from. So while I waited for Mr. Lawrence to read the letter, I began to babble. What I babbled about in Mr. Lawrence's office. 1, his pictures. Really just one picture, specifically a framed photo of him and another man that I spied on his cabinet. 2, I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Lawrence, but who is the man in that picture?" He told me that it was his brother, and I said, "He looks just like the dry cleaner on my block." 3, Mr. Lawrence said, "Are you sure?" And I answered, "Yes. He has a cat named Oliver who always sits on the counter. We went there once a long time ago to get my dad's jacket cleaned, but when the jacket came back, my dad's eyes got all watery, and Mom said she thought there was a cat hair on it, and my dad's allergic, so we go to a different dry cleaner now." 6 reasons that was a bad idea. 1, Mr. Lawrence said my brother is a dry cleaner, and he has a cat named Oliver, but his store isn't in this neighborhood. 2, I didn't live in that neighborhood either. 3, Mr. Lawrence asked, "You say my brother's dry cleaning shop is on the block you live on now?" 4, I tried to say yes, but no sound came out. What Mr. Lawrence didn't know was that my family had moved years ago when I was in preschool because the rent went up on our old apartment. According to the city's rules, Ted would have been allowed to stay in that school, but I wouldn't have been guaranteed a spot there when I started kindergarten, especially because the space was really limited. Since my parents wanted me to be able to go to the same school as Ted, they didn't tell anyone about our move. The new tenants in the apartment put any mail address to us, including letters from school, on a table in the entryway, and we stopped by every once in a while to pick it up. Mom and Dad kept saying we'd move back to the old neighborhood eventually, once we could afford it again. And they told Ted and me not to say anything about it at school. They said it didn't matter since we would move back soon, but the Department of Education might not understand that. But Dad never got the raise he was hoping for at work, and he and Mom seemed more worried about money than ever, so we stayed put. 5, where we used to live in Brooklyn, school zoning is a pretty big deal. Suddenly my face felt very warm, and my stomach felt like a squirrel was trapped inside it. I knew I had blown our cover. 6, the cat was out of the bag, and sitting right on the dry cleaner's counter. I never did find out what was in the note Mrs. Simmons sent to Mr. Lawrence. 5 things had happened after the dry cleaner incident. 1, Mr. Lawrence called my parents and asked if we had moved. 2, Mom and Dad fessed up. 3, Mr. Lawrence said I could finish the school year there, but that I would have to switch schools in the fall. 4, Mom and Dad started having lots of quiet talks in their room with the door closed. Once I overheard Dad saying, "How does she even remember that dry cleaner? We haven't used them in years." And Mom said, "We can't let her think this is her fault." 5, on the last day of school, they hit Ted and me with big news. Dad had gotten a new job working as an engineer on a big highway project, and that summer we were going to move to Clover Gap, a teeny town about 7 hours away from the city. 3 ways my family reacted to the news about the move. 1, Ted started spending every free minute at his friend Joe's house, and when he was home, he usually was in his room with the door closed and music blaring. 2, Mom cleaned out every closet and drawer and gave away anything we hadn't used in the past 6 months. I had to keep a close watch on her to make sure she didn't toss anything important. 3, Dad stayed home from work a lot more than usual. During the day, he helped Mom with cleaning, and at night he was always online, researching things he was going to have to know for his new job. He seemed a little nervous about it. I guess building a new highway in the country is a lot different from the kinds of projects he did in the big city. But he also talked constantly about how awesome life in Clover Gap was going to be, and all the cool things we would do there. Hike in the woods, canoe in the lake, roast marshmallows in our own backyard. 5 ways I reacted to the news about the move. Number 1. What? My family had lived in Brooklyn since before I was born. Mom and Dad sometimes talked about wanting a house and a big yard, but I never thought they'd actually do something about it. And now, all of a sudden, we were moving so far away? 2, worrying. What would the other kids be like? Would anyone want to be friends with me? How would I survive without Millie? Would anyone there be as great as her? And how would life in the country be different? Would there be more bugs? What about bears? 3, wondering. When I overheard Mom say, "We can't let her think this is her fault," what did that mean? That she really thought it was my fault that we were going to move? And she just didn't want me to feel bad about it? Did Dad have to get a new job because of me? I mean, wasn't it weird that he happened to get a new job right when I babbled to Mr. Lawrence? Also, I wondered what the deal was with Dad's new job. Mom's job was pretty flexible. She's a graphic designer, and she can work from home. But would Dad still have to work once the highway was finished? And if not, did that mean we'd get to move back to Brooklyn? When I asked about that, Dad sighed, and Mom just said, "One thing at a time, Annie. One thing at a time." So I'm still wondering. 4, wishing I'd kept my big mouth shut with Mr. Lawrence. 5, waiting for Ted to stop hating me. 6 ways Ted and I used to spend time together. 1, watching TV. 2, arguing. 3, washing dishes. This was our job every night after dinner. I washed and Ted dried. I tried to get him to take turns. I hated washing every night because my fingers got pruny and I never felt like I could get the pots clean enough. But he said he was the only one tall enough to reach the high shelves to put the glasses away, so he had to be the dryer until I got taller. 4, building Dixie cup towers. We'd done this since we were little. Ted would probably have been embarrassed to admit that we still spent as much time on this as we did. He knocked them down if one of his friends was coming over, but we were really good at it. We built towers that were taller than my dad. 5, watching YouTube videos about wild animals. Some of these were really cute, like the ones with mama elephants and their babies. But one day, Ted stumbled across a video of a bear attacking a guy who was making a wildlife documentary. I will spare you the details, but let's just say I had nightmares for a month. And Ted got in big trouble for showing it to me. 6, listening to music. When he was in a good mood, he'd ask me to listen to new music he liked, then make playlists of my favorites and put them on my iPod. So I had playlists with names like A, Annie's Jams, music that made me happy. B, Annie Dances, music to dance to, obviously. C, Settle Down, Sister, songs to listen to when I was angry. 4 reasons I suspected Ted was angry about the move. 1, even though I was going to have to go to a different school if we stayed in Brooklyn, his life would have barely changed. He's 12 and in middle school, and for him, it didn't matter what neighborhood we lived in. 2, he had his heart set on applying to LaGuardia, a really famous performing arts high school in Manhattan next year. 3, his classic rock cover band, Ted Zeppelin, the band name was always changing, but that was the latest one, had finally booked some gigs for the summer. 4, he yelled, "Why couldn't you have kept your stupid mouth shut?" when he heard the story about Mr. Lawrence and the dry cleaner. So I guess I more than suspected Ted was angry about the move. I knew he was angry. It was pretty clear he thought it was all my fault, and I had a feeling he was right. It was because of my big mouth that we were moving. 3 things I used to be known for at school. 1, being a good writer. 2, being Millie's best friend. 3, never getting in trouble. I realize those aren't the most important things to be known for in 4th grade. It's not like being the fastest runner, the best artist, or having an uncle who's a movie star. So the truth is that a lot of people probably didn't know me at all. But that has started to change. 1 thing I'm known for at school. 1, getting myself kicked out. I'm not sure how she heard, but a few days after my visit to Mr. Lawrence's office, Hannah Krenzler came up to me at recess and said, "Is it true that you aren't allowed to come back to school here next year?" When I told her my family was moving, she said, "I heard you got yourself kicked out." Just then, the bell rang for us to go back inside, so I didn't have a chance to say more. But that was only the beginning. 5 rumors that started about why I had to leave school. 1, I walked into Mr. Lawrence's office and insulted his family. 2, I walked into Mr. Lawrence's office and broke something. 3, I walked into Mr. Lawrence's office and cursed. 4, I stole something from Mrs. Simmons. 5, I thought I was too smart for this place and I was switching to a boarding school for quiet geniuses. Every time I heard one of these rumors, I didn't even know what to say. They were so crazy. So I stayed quiet, as usual. I became quieter than I ever was before, and the quieter I got, the more people seemed convinced I was hiding a big secret. The more I tried to disappear, the bigger the stories got about me. By the end of the school year, I felt like I never wanted to see most of my classmates again. Convenient, I guess, since I was about to move far away. The only person I knew I would truly miss was Millie. 3 things I thought Millie would say when I told her about the move. 1, "You can't leave me." 2, "You have to stay here." 3, "If they make you leave, I will visit you every weekend." 3 things Millie actually said when I told her about the move. 1, "Your parents should never have lied in the first place." 2, "But why do you have to spill the beans to Mr. Lawrence?" 3, "I can't believe you have to move because you got kicked out of school." 3 things I said back to Millie. 1, "I didn't mean to tell Mr. Lawrence. It was a stupid mistake." 2, "That's not why we're moving. It's because my dad got a new job." I didn't tell her I was also starting to become convinced we were moving because of me. 3, "Everybody's parents lie about something. Yours have been telling you that you've had the same goldfish for years, and I can totally tell they switch it every time the old one dies." This was kind of a bold move for me. Millie always told me how I was so easy, meaning agreeable, I guess, and it felt good to hear that. And I didn't mind so much that Millie was usually the one making plans and decisions for us. She had great ideas.